Hello, welcome to Dan's Models Works. And today we're going to be starting a new project. Now, starting a new project after you finish something is always kind of tricky. Sometimes you have no idea what you want to work on. Sometimes you've just been itching to get at something. This kit here, I have had this for quite some time. I'm pretty sure it's either I've had it for 16 years or 18 years. I'm not sure which. Now, a lot of experienced modelers are going to look at this and say, oh no, not that old chestnut. This is the Monagram F4F Wildcat. It's in 1/48 scale, and this thing has been around forever. This particular issue I picked up in the 1990s while I was still working at a hobby shop. But the actual tooling goes back much, much further. As a matter of fact, when we get inside, you'll see just how old this kit is. Now, I just kind of figured since he's been sitting on the shelf pretty much longer than anything else, that's what I was going to build. So why don't we look inside the box and decide just exactly what I'm going to do with it. Wow. And yeah, I knew what was in it. It's a pretty basic kit. And somewhere around here it is, we have the original copyright date. Let's see if we can focus in on it. Copyright 1961, Monagram Models Incorporated. So yeah, this has been around for a while, longer than me. As a matter of fact, 8 years longer than me. It's not a bad kit for its day. It's quite nice. Nice rivet detail. The landing gear is all there. There's a lot of flash. They gave you a pilot figure with this huge lug coming out of his back. One of the other major sprues. Nothing really wrong with the propeller. Here we have those gigantic drop tanks that are featured on the front of the box. I'm not quite sure where Monagram ever got the idea from those from. Here's the other side of the fuselage. Here's the wing center section. It slides right through the fuselage. And this is probably about the only interior part you get. The rear bulkhead of the cockpit. You didn't get much of an engine, that's for sure. Just what you see here. Just the front of the engine inside the cowling. And you know what? Painted up, that shouldn't be too bad. But I do have a little goodie to show you. Now, shortly after I bought this kit, I bought this little gem. So we can focus on it here. Focus, there we are. This is from Engines and Things. It's a resin engine, and it is one of the engines that was used in later Wildcats. So we might be using that. Here we have the instructions. It's a pretty simple kit. There's not much to it. Basically, you can see the wing center section gets trapped between the fuselage sides. And there's the rear bulkhead. And that's all the cockpit detail you're getting. There's nothing else in here, folks. Now, the wings were designed so that you could actually fold them up. There we go. You could fold them up, so there was a little bit of play value to this kit. Now, I suppose I could build this in such a way that one wing would be folded, the other one would be out. And I'm sure I can find pictures of the inside of the wings where the wing fold is. There certainly are resin kits available that I could use. Here's the marking guide. So, what am I going to do with this? What I'm thinking is, the outside of the plane I'm basically going to leave just stock from the box. I'm not going to do anything, no super detailing or anything to it. I think basically the outside is nice the way it is. 50-50 on using that aftermarket engine. One major change I will make to the kit, though, is I think I'm going to scratch build an interior. It's not going to be a model show winning interior. Just basically bring the cockpit into, let's say, the 80s. You know, just so when we look inside, you can say, okay, there's the seat, there's the instrument panel. That's basically what the floor looked like. I could buy a resin interior, but I'm just not enthusiastic about it. Sometimes you just itching to super detail something, and other times you just want to put it together. So I think a little bit of time invested in the cockpit, just like I said, to bring it up to date and basically put together the kit stock otherwise. Alright, I've got the parts on my workbench here, and there's a few things we need to establish before we start. First of all is just exactly how these parts go together. The main thing I want to figure out here is the wing roots that go on top. How well do they fit? And if I glue this wing root on top of the wing, can I use it to establish the position of the center section inside the fuselage? So that's the first thing we've got to figure out. I have this in the locating pins, and if I close up that, okay, we've got quite a bit of gaps going on here. I'll have to address that. The other thing we need to look at is the canopy, unfortunately, is molded all in one piece, and in the closed position, well, difficult to see much in there. So that'll determine how much detail I choose to add to the inside of it. Now you could be saying, geez, Dan, why don't you just buy the Tamiya kit? Or why don't you just buy the Academy kit? Or I could do that, but I already own this one. So I'm thinking, you know what, let's just see what kind of a job I can do on this one. Okay, using my razor saw, I've separated the windscreen from the sliding portion of the canopy. And my main concern was to make sure that it didn't screw up any of the framing on the windscreen. And I think I've pretty much achieved that. I'm not quite as worried about the front part of the framing on the sliding portion. I can restore that by putting some styrene here. Now the sliding portion of the canopy does sit a little bit high, but that can be fixed simply by rubbing down this just a little bit, and with the cockpit or with the canopy on top of it, hopefully you won't be able to notice that it's been reduced in height. And the whole reason for going through this exercise of cutting the canopy is so that I can, with this big, thick, blobby piece of plastic there, you won't be able to see anything I do inside. So, once again, yes, I know I probably could have bought a vac form canopy, but the point of this project is just to see what I can do with the parts I have on hand. Okay, now I've adjusted the fit a little bit, but you can probably see there's still a little bit of play here. So I'm thinking if I run a strip of styrene on this upper wing part on both sides and then contour it shape, it should make it easier to locate everything together. Because what I want to do is I want to be able to position this piece in here and build up my cockpit inside and then trap it and put the other wing root on. That's the plan. Okay, I've tweaked the fuselage a little bit to achieve a closer joint of the parts. Now I'm going to mount the tops of my wing roots again, just to see, like I said, how good a fit we're going to get. If we look at this, there's a little bit of wiggle at the back, but at the front we're almost tight. Mind you, this needs to be closed up a little bit here. Once we do that, that loosens things up a bit. The next step is going to be to add a little bit of styrene to the inside of each wing root, and then we'll see if that tightens up the fit. Okay, here I've run a piece of styrene on the inside of this wing root. It's just regular evergreen styrene. I'll put one of these on each side, and I'll see if that closes the gap. If not, I'll add one more strip. Okay, I think that problem is solved. You can just see the white strip of styrene on either side, and that seems to fix the fit. So I should be able to glue together this wing root and the center section and know that I've got a fixed point that everything can come together on. Now while I have my fuselage halves mocked up, I'm just going to make sure that this aftermarket engine will fit, and it will. So I don't see any real reason I can't be using this aftermarket engine. Okay, I've glued the bulkhead in place here, plus the wing and the wing root here. Looks like there's going to be a fairly serious gap underneath to be filled. Well, we'll have to figure that out when the time comes. But for now, I'm just going to concentrate on fabricating some sort of a basic interior, because this is all they give you. As a matter of fact, this is the pilot figure with that giant lug coming out of his back, and that's supposed to go into the slot in the bulkhead. Yes, Jim, there's life here, but not as we know it. Alright, as we continue to test fit the engine, I've ground away this mounting boss for the cowling that we're not going to need. If I set the engine in here, we'll see that it doesn't quite go back as far as it should. So probably if I file off the back of this, right down there, we should be able to mount it onto the leading edge of the center section of the wing. And since nobody was really going to see that, that won't be too much of a big deal. The other piece of major surgery that needs to happen here is the engine that comes with the kit is basically mounted into the front of the cowling. So that'll have to be removed. Here's another bridge burned. I've got most of the engine face out of the cowling. I still have to get rid of the rest of it on the inside here. Okay, we're getting close. The engine front is gone. Now we just have to get rid of this inner ring here. Okay, here's the cowling cut out. As you can see, I made a little boo-boo there. I'm going to have to fix that. But I think the depth is much greater than it was before. Okay, I've installed a little piece of styrene for that air intake, and I'll blend it in with a little bit of filler. I've installed a little block of styrene on the leading edge of the inside of the wing there, and that's going to serve as the main attachment point for my engine. I'm going to put another block a little bit farther up just to give me a little more meat to hang on to. Okay, on either side of the cockpit there's basically a shelf in which controls and various electrical boxes are mounted on. I've installed one on the left side of the fuselage, and as well you can see the extra padding that I've put here to hold the engine. I've also put one on this side here. Okay, the basic seat pan has been scratch built, so now I'm going to have to make the framework for it to mount on that back bulkhead. In the picture I have, there seems to be a metal tubular framework at the back of the seat that connects to the bulkhead, so I've put on these two brass rods. Okay, I've cut out the basic shape for the instrument panel. The main instrument panel on a Wildcat's actually quite small, and it does have some nice rounded corners on it. I've just perched it on top of the wing here so you guys can see it better. Okay, this object here beneath the splotch is going to be the instrument panel of my Wildcat. It probably should be slightly deeper, but it basically has the right layout. The instruments on the Wildcat weren't too well organized, but this little piece here is going to go on this larger piece, and then the larger piece is going to be further shaped, approximately representing what you find in the Wildcat. The two pieces have now been laminated together, and the holes, I'll put a little bit of black paint in those, and they'll represent the dials and instruments. I've drilled a couple more holes in the support structure to fit a couple more gauges that are present on the aircraft. I'm not going to try to actually represent any of the switches. Like I said before, we just want to represent something that's a little bit better than the molded in blob that's in the aircraft right now. Here we can see the seat. It's made up of about 4 pieces of styrene, and I've put a little bit of bent wire on the back just to represent the tubular frame that would go to the bulkhead in behind. Now what will really hold it in place is, you can see there's just some chunks of styrene there, and that's just to give it a firm mounting. Probably when we get it in the plane you won't be able to see that, hopefully. Alright, I've installed a couple of strip styrene ribs on either side of the cockpit. the ribs that are shown in this location aren't particularly large, so I think these will probably do. Next thing I'll do is I'll just snake them off with an X-Acto knife to get them to the right length. Now the ribs have been trimmed to length. Now I've glued the seat in here just so that I could establish the location of some other things, mainly the footboards, because there isn't an actual solid floor inside Wildcat. So the seat's been glued into place. It may be just a smidge to one side, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. And you can see the framing on the sides there. Alright, I've started building the floor, or rather the non-floor, as people familiar with the Wildcat will know. It didn't actually have a true floor, but it basically had two troughs for the pilot's feet to sit on. If we look, I'm well aware that the real troughs really didn't go much past the front of the instrument panel there. But when we close it all up, you won't be able to see how far it goes forward. I was more interested in, let's just focus in on here, I was more concerned with structural integrity at this point. I've put a blob on there to represent the throttle quadrant, as well as there's a little block there with a couple levers on it. The piece you see underneath there, the control stick is basically going to be mounted on there. And let's just close up the fuselage halves just to see what we're going to see when we put it together. There we go. Now, I'm not looking for perfection. I just basically want, when I look in the cockpit of this model, to basically see what should represent an interior. You know, I could have bought an interior. I just wanted to see what I could quickly do using the scraps of plastic on my workbench and things like that. I still have some detail to put on this side here. Main thing I want to put on is there's a large electrical box on that shelf, and there should be a crank there, a fairly large crank for the landing gear. So the control stick still has to be put in. I think I'm going to put the rudder pedals in, and there is some sort of a gauge underneath the main instrument panel. I might put that in as well. So, but so far I'm happy with what's happening here with the cockpit. All right, now I've gone ahead and painted up the left side of the cockpit here. Let's just do a good focus in on this. Not talking huge buckets of detail, but basically most of the things that should be here are here. We've got the floor, we've got the rudder pedals, I've glued in the instrument panel, the control stick is in place. Now the other side, I've just finished building the details, so that still has to be painted. But you can see the basic ribs are there. I'm assuming this is the radio equipment. There's a handle there, that's for winding up the landing gear. So this will have a coat of zinc chromate just like the other side, and then I'll pick out as many details as I can. Now, I mean, obviously, if you wanted to invest in a resin or photo etch kit, you could probably just really go to crazy on this. But once again, just test fitting this, making sure everything is getting along inside there. You can see there's the unpainted radio equipment. Tilt this forward here. Hopefully you can see the instrument panel. Switch it around. You can see the seat. And of course, you know, the control stick right there. So I'll get the right side of the fuselage painted up, and we're getting close to putting the fuselage together. Alright, most of the detailing is now in. Let's see if we can focus in on this a little bit better. There we go. That's the left-hand side. Here's the right-hand side painted up. You can see the crank for the landing gear, and it's probably only maybe 10% of the buttons there should be on the radio, but I like it. It's my model. So I'll just snap together the two halves so you can see what it'll look like put together. Okay, fuselage halves are held together. The only piece in there that came with the kit really is that headrest. Everything else was modeled after, or was manufactured using bits and pieces from my workbench. There's the radio on the other side there. I think we get a pretty good view of the instrument panel. This will pretty much conclude part 1. Part 2, we'll get the engine painted up, we'll get it installed, we'll get the fuselage halves glued together, and we'll start doing something about these giant gaps. Considering I just wanted to do a basic interior, I think it looks pretty good. I mean, as modelers, we always have to make a decision as to how much extra work we're going to put into something. But when I look in there, I see the same thing I see when I look in a picture of a real Wildcat, and that's good enough for me. See you next time on Dan's Model Works.